The worst vault in Fallout isn't the one that killed the most people. A vault that murders everyone in one afternoon is at least over. So here's the real question. Which is worse? A vault that kills you, or one that refuses to let you die? Because the worst vault to live in isn't the one with the most corpses. It's the one where nobody dies, nobody escapes, and nobody even knows how long they've been in there. Today I'm ranking every serious candidate, and the winner has been in Fallout 3 all along, with most players walking right past it. Everyone has a gun. Vault 34 is one of the easier vaults on this list to survive, which is a strange thing to say about a place that ends in a radioactive civil war. And survivable is the whole measure here, because living in a vault and dying in one are two completely different horrors, and most rankings mix them up. An ending is the one mercy a suffering person can count on. So the vaults that rank worst are the ones that drag it out longest and leave no door out, not even death. The experiment was about giving people way too much. Vault Tech handed this Mojave shelter an armory the size of a small military depot, far more guns and ammunition than a few hundred civilians could ever need, gave the population no birth control and no reason to ration, and locked the door. So the vault overcrowded. The overseer panicked and welded the armory shut to keep control, and the dwellers who wanted their weapons back staged an armed revolt to get in. One faction fought its way out entirely and became the Boomers, the artillery cult you meet at Nellis Air Force Base in New Vegas, still ruled by an old woman named Pearl, and still shelling anyone who approaches the runway. Their elders, people like Loyal and Pearl, still teach the next generation that the outside world is the enemy, because that fear is the one souvenir their vault sent them out the door with. The ones who stayed behind lost their reactor to a radiation leak and slowly turned feral, which is what's left shuffling around the vault by the time the courier arrives. You can read the Overseer's own terminals down there logging the moment control slipped, ration disputes turning into gunfights, the armory getting sealed, the seal getting broken. But look at what the residents of Vault 34 actually had. They had guns, they had targets, and they had a reason to get up in the morning, even if that reason was aiming a rifle at the guy across the hall. An arms race is a human kind of horror, the sort of person can understand and plan around and sometimes even win, and some of them literally won, walked out into the sun, and founded their own society at an airbase. That's the thing the Boomers proved that the rest of Vault 34 can't, that there was a version of this experiment you could survive with your mind and your name intact, as long as you were willing to shoot your way to the exit before the reactor finished the job. A vault you can shoot your way out of barely qualifies for this list. Strip away the guns, the targets, and the daylight, and watch how much worse it gets when the thing hunting you is moving inside your own skull. Music is a weapon. Vault 92 took a shelter full of gentle people and quietly rebuilt them into killers without a single one of them agreeing to anything. The recruits were told they'd been chosen to preserve America's musical and artistic heritage through the apocalypse, and Vault Tech meant that part literally, packing the place with musicians and composers. You can still trace one of them by name. On the surface in Fallout 3, there's an old violinist called Agatha whose mother came out of Vault 92, and she sends you back down into it to recover a priceless violin called the Soil Stradivarius, which is how a lot of players first learn the vault even exists. The whole detour is technically a music quest called Agatha's Song, which is a darkly funny wrapper for what's actually underground, hidden inside the white noise piped constantly through the vault. S-speakers were hypnotic suggestions, a combat conditioning program built to test whether you could turn ordinary civilians into obedient super soldiers through sound alone, and the staff logs record it working, then record the researchers' own rising panic as the violence spread to people who were never supposed to be dosed at all. These were artists who came down trusting that boredom was the worst thing waiting for them, and instead the vault reached past their eyes and their reason and went straight for the part of the brain that never gets a vote. By the time you reach the vault, it's overrun with the feral results of that conditioning, the descendants of an orchestra turned into things that scream and swing at you in the dark, and the only clean thing left is the violin an old woman on the surface still wants back. You can still find the soundproofed recording booth where it was all piped in from, a quiet little room at the center of the vault where somebody sat and decided a hallway full of musicians would make good test subjects for a weapon. That's a real jump in cruelty from Vault 34, where at least the enemy had a face. You can't shoot a suggestion, you can't barricade a door against the ventilation, and worst of all, you can't even be sure the violent impulse is yours or something the walls put there, which is a kind of helplessness Vault 34's armory never came close to. The residents of the next vault weren't ambushed by their own vault, they walked into a voting booth and killed each other on purpose once a year for generations. They voted on who died. Vault 11 talked hundreds of ordinary decent people into murdering one of their own every year, and the disturbing part is how reasonable and fair the whole system felt from the inside. The vault's computer laid out a simple rule at the start: sacrifice one resident a year, or the automated systems would kill every last one of you. So they built a democracy around the killing. They held real elections for Overseer, except the Overseer was the person who'd be sacrificed, which meant the whole political political culture of Vault 11 was built around desperately campaigning to lose, with voting blocks like the Justice Bloc and the Coalition forming, smearing, and knifing each other to shove the death sentence onto somebody else. One resident, Catherine Stone, rigged a vote to send a man to his death out of pure revenge, and the holotapes she left behind are still down there for the courier to find, right next to the cheerful automated voice that thanks each year's winner for their service. This ran for generations until the machine finally jammed and only 5 people were left, and those 5 refused, told the computer no, and the computer calmly revealed the whole thing had always been a test of whether a population would ever refuse to kill on command, and that, by refusing, they'd passed. The sacrifices happened in a sealed chamber where automated turrets did the actual killing, so no resident ever had to pull a trigger, they only had to vote, which is the exact bit of distance that let a polite little society keep doing this for decades without ever quite admitting it was a murder cult. Beautiful ending, except 4 of the 5 shot each other in the aftermath anyway, and the last survivor recorded a final, broken holotape alone in a vault that had finally run out of people to feed itself. Here's why it still isn't #1 though. For a normal resident, most years were survivable, even ordinary, and if you kept your head down and never got popular enough to get elected, your odds weren't actually that bad. Vault 11 ran a murder lottery and somehow still left room to fall in love, raise a kid, and complain about the food in between the sacrifices. That's the specific reason it can't take the crown. The horror had an off-season, a rhythm you could live around, and a life with a bad week once a year is still clearly a life. The next vault looked at those ordinary in-between days and built an X, Paramount with no in-betweens at all, left open on purpose. Vault 12 was engineered to fail, and the cruelty is that its people were promised the exact thing every vault promised, then handed the opposite on purpose. This is the shelter under Bakersfield, California, the one that becomes Necropolis in the original Fallout, and its experiment is almost insulting in how simple it was. The vault door was deliberately built so it couldn't fully seal. When the bombs fell in 2077, the residents were told they were safe behind it like everyone in every other vault, but Vault Tech had designed that door to leave a gap because the whole point was to expose a bunch of trusting people to raw surface radiation and record exactly what long exposure did to human beings. What it did was turn them into ghouls. The dwellers didn't even know their door had a design flaw. They thought a jam had trapped the radiation in with them, and by the time anyone understood, the change was already happening. Not the clean, instant death of a direct blast, but a slow rot over months and years. Skin and muscle decaying while the person inside stayed fully conscious and alive to feel every stage of it. And here's the part that lands hardest. Most of them didn't die. They endured, and generations later, they're still there. A whole ghoul city ruled by a leader named Set, still shuffling through the irradiated ruins of the town they built out of the vault that betrayed them. Necropolis, the city those ghouls built, is one of the places the original vault dweller has to search for a replacement water chip in the first Fallout, and it does not go well for the people living there. Not long after that visit, the Master's super mutant army sweeps through and wipes out most of the ghoul population entirely, which, in a grim way, is close to the kindest thing that ever happens to anyone from Vault 12. So why isn't the vault that gives you a slow-motion apocalypse in your own skin the worst on this list? Because the ghouls of Necropolis could still leave. They walked out the broken door, built something on the surface, and a life spent decaying in the open ruin of a city you made yourself is somehow freer than what the last vaults on this list offer. The ghouls at least kept their own faces. Set still knows himself in a mirror, still runs his town, still remembers being a man, and however miserable that life is, it belongs to him. The next vault takes even that. You stop being you. Vault 87 is where a person walks in and something else walks out, and it forces a question I've never managed to get an actual answer to. This place in the capital wasteland was never a shelter for one single day. It was a laboratory for the forced evolutionary virus, and the residents were the raw material, dosed with FEV until nearly every one of them was turned into a super mutant, and Vault 87 is the confirmed origin of the entire East Coast super mutant population that's been terrorizing the DC ruins ever since. The radiation around the main entrance runs so high, over 400 rads, that walking up to it directly is a death sentence, which is why the only safe way in runs through the caves beneath the child settlement of Little Lamplight, and a stretch the kids there have literally named Murder Pass. The Overseer's own terminals lay out the forced dosing in plain, matter-of-fact language, subject by subject, and buried in that same facility is a GICK. The terraforming device the entire main quest of Fallout 3 is built around chasing, which is the bitter irony of the place, a machine designed to create clean new life sitting in the one vault that turned its own people into monsters. And then there's Fox, the one super mutant smart enough to understand exactly what was done to him, who you find locked alone in a cell in Fallout 3, sealed away by his own kind out of fear, fully aware of what he used to be and what he can never be again. That awareness is the knife, and it's why 87 is so hard to place. For the overwhelming majority of its victims, the change erased the very person who could have grieved it. And if the you who walked in is simply gone, replaced by something that doesn't remember or mourn, is that worse than staying yourself and enduring? Or is it, in the bleakest possible way, the only mercy Vault 87 ever produced? The cruelest reading is that Fox is proof the mercy wasn't guaranteed, that the vault could and did leave a few people fully intact inside monstrous bodies, aware of every second of what it cost them, and unable to take a single piece of it back, because the two vaults left standing don't offer that escape hatch at all. Every one of them is built out of the opposite of forgetting. Their whole design is to keep you and make you watch. Can't trust your eyes. Vault 106 kept every resident perfectly alive, and stole the one thing that made being alive worth anything: the ability to tell what was real. The experiment here was chemical and patient. Vault Tech rigged the air supply to release mind-altering drugs, and the terminals confirmed the timing. The drug was pumped into the vents 10 days after the door sealed, then kept flowing. A slow, steady dose meant to study how a trapped group of people slowly loses its mind over years. Nobody collapsed, and nobody mutated. They simply lost their grip day after day, until the wall between what was in front of them and what was crawling around inside their own skulls dissolved completely. There was no dramatic incident, no riot, no single bad night the logs point to, which is part of what makes 106 so quietly awful. It's just a population getting less and less able to tell a dream from a hallway until eventually the difference stopped existing for them at all. When you walk into Vault 106 in Fallout 3, the game does something to you it does almost nowhere else. Your own screen glitches and tears, the corridors flicker, hostile figures phase in and out of existence around you, and for a few disorienting minutes, you get a thin taste of the exact thing these people were locked inside for the rest of their natural lives. Now stretch that taste across decades and hold it. You can't trust your senses, so you can't trust your memories, so you can't trust that the person in front of you is a person and not a hallucination quietly telling you to pick up a knife. And there's never a clear enough stretch to plan a way out, because the drug never lets up long enough for you to be sure you're even awake to plan one. This is a serious step past everything before it, because 106 attacks the exact tool you'd need to survive any of the earlier vaults. In Vault 34 you could aim, in Vault 11 you could count the years, in Vault 12 you could at least walk out the broken door, but in Vault 106 you can't even confirm the floor is where your feet think it is. One door was still open in Vault 106 though, the same one that was open in every vault so far. The drugs, the madness, the violence, all of it still ends in death eventually, and death here is an exit. The last vault on this list is the only one that ever bothered to weld that door shut. The Box of Puppets. Vault 77 ran its entire experiment on a single human being, and what it was quietly measuring is one of the darkest jokes Vault Tech ever told. The setup sounds absurd the first time you hear it, and that's the whole thing. One man sealed alone inside an entire vault, with nothing for company but a crate full of puppets. This one lives almost entirely in a promotional comic called One Man and a Crate of Puppets, and it follows exactly the breakdown you'd dread. The residents slowly coming apart, holding longer and longer conversations with the little painted faces, until the line between the lonely man and the wooden crowd he built to survive stops meaning anything, and he becomes the thing the wasteland later remembers only as the Puppet Man. The comic came out back in 2009 as Fallout 3 promo material, which means Vault 77 is canon almost entirely B, cause of a single short story about a man losing an argument with a hand puppet. And somehow, that's still one of the darker Vault ideas Bethesda has ever come up with. What makes it hit harder once you know the timeline is how long the man held out before he broke. He was sealed in on the day the bombs fell and didn't so much as open the puppet crate for over a year. More than 15 months of pacing an empty vault alone before he finally reached for the only company he had. Once he did, he named them a king, a grandmother, a dog he called Reverend Hound, and a Vault Boy puppet that eventually started talking back. And the day he decided the Vault Boy had committed a murder is the day the man he used to be effectively stopped existing. The grim punchline is that he actually got out, wandered into the wasteland, and became a story slavers tell each other in the dark. And Fallout 3 quietly backs this up with a lone Vault 77 jumpsuit tucked away in Paradise Falls next to a recording from a terrified slaver begging someone to burn it before its owner comes looking. The reason it counts as a real experiment, and not just a sad story, is the total absence of a cover story. No fake rehab program, no saving our culture excuse. barely even a lie. Just one man and the very specific cruelty of being the only one of your kind behind a sealed door with nobody left to be a person for. For sheer intensity of individual suffering, 77 is near the very top, and there's something uniquely awful about a mind cracking apart with no witness to even confirm it happened. But it's one person, and it's finite. A single person with no help doesn't last 200 years in a sealed vault, and however completely that one mind shatters, it still, eventually, stops. The vault at the top of this list was engineered so that nothing ever truly stops. The worst vault to actually live in, Vault 112, is the answer, and it wins because it's the only vault on this entire list that took death off the table on purpose and then simply never stopped. Every piece of it was shaped by one man's hand. The overseer was Dr. Stanislaus Brown, and he wasn't just some background administrator, he was one of the main brains behind the whole Vault experiment program, a man who helped design the cruelty in dozens of other shelters before building the one he'd keep for himself. He sealed his residents into virtual reality pods, wired their minds into a black and white 1950s simulation called Tranquility Lane, and settled in to run it for over 200 years. Inside that simulation, Braun plays a sweet little girl named Betty, and Betty is God. The residents are pre-war families frozen in a fake little town, and at least one of them, an old woman named Mrs. Dithers, has figured out that none of it's real, that she's been alive for centuries and can't die. And Braun's response is to keep her just aware enough to suffer while he resets everyone around her. This is where the whole ranking pays off, because Vault 112 is the one place that answers the question at the top clean. The suffering runs longer than anything else on this list by a mile, over 2 centuries, and still going when the game reaches it. There's no escape whatsoever, because their bodies are physically wired into the pods, and their minds are locked in the sim, so there's no door to walk out of and no wasteland to run to. And death, the one exit that ranked every other vault below this one, is the exact thing Braun took away first. When he kills one of his playthings, and he does it constantly, on a whim, they don't die, they reset, dropped back into the same painted morning with the horror scrubbed from their memory, so he can do it again tomorrow to an audience that doesn't remember the last 1,000 times. There's no version of Groundhog Day this bleak, because at least Bill Murray knew he was in the loop and could try to break it. These people don't even get that. They wake up fresh and unaware and walk straight back into whatever the Ire Overseer feels like doing to them today. That single detail moves Vault 112 into a category of its own. Every other vault, at its absolute worst, still offered an ending. Vault 34 ended in daylight, Vault 11 ended when the people ran out, Vault 12 ended in the ruins, Vault 77 ended when the man did, Vault 106 ended in death. Vault 112 was carefully built so that ending never comes, because the ending was the only thing in the universe that could ever set Braun's victims free. And it gets worse, because the residents don't even know they're victims. Braun built the sim to feel almost normal, a quiet suburban street where they think they're living quiet suburban lives. So their suffering doesn't even come with the dignity of understanding that it's happening to them. When you finally get into that simulation in Fallout 3, chasing your own father James, who Braun is trapped inside it, the game hands you the closest thing to a real choice it ever offers. You can play along with Braun's games, or hunt down the failsafe he buried in an abandoned house on the corner, a hidden sequence that summons a simulated Chinese army to slaughter every resident at once, and the game treats that massacre as the merciful ending. Soldiers pour into that perfect black and white street and gun down the neighbors you've spent the last hour talking to, and the single kindest thing you can do for these people is trigger a fake invasion that kills all of them. Braun could have run any simulation he wanted across those 2 centuries. A paradise, a blank, a dreamless sleep, and he chose torture, refreshed and repeated, specifically because a dead toy stops being fun, and a toy that can't die never runs out. Every other overseer here was at least chasing data for someone above them, but Braun kept going purely because he enjoyed it, long after any real experiment had ended. That's the dark logic Vault Tech was chasing all along. A subject who can't leave and can't die generates the most data, which quietly makes the worst vault to live in the same place as its most successful experiment. That makes the people of Tranquility Lane the only victims here who aren't even a data point in some report, just a hobby, suffering for an audience of one who could switch it off any afternoon and doesn't want to. Everyone else on this list eventually got out, through the door or through the grave. The people of Vault 112 are still in there right now, still tormented on a loop, still smiling up at a painted sky that stopped being real 200 years ago. If you enjoyed the video and want to know what Vault Tech was really doing before the bombs fell, click the video on the screen now.